Welcome back. Call it the tale of two Donalds. Republican allies in Congress are nominating President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. A lot can go very wrong, but the president is getting credit from Republicans and Democrats for the historic melting of the icy cold relationship with North Korea. Hey, the unemployment rate is now the lowest since 2000. But on the other hand, President Trump's legal strategy when it comes to the now multiple criminal investigations threatening his presidency is less crazy like a fox and more just like crazy. Another one of his lawyers quits. He hires Rudy Giuliani, who goes on Fox to say, yeah, the $130,000 was to shut up porn star Stormy Daniels just before the election. Now the president says Rudy just doesn't know what he's talking about. And meanwhile, the special counsel on Russian interference continues to connect the dots. And joining us for more are former U.S. Congressman Dan Miller, Cheryl Wilson, the chair of the Manatee Democratic Party, and Charlie Kennedy of the Manatee School Board, who is also one of those non-affiliated voters. And Charlie, we want to talk to you. But let's start off with what is really kind of hard to understand, and it would be easy to laugh out if we weren't talking about such a serious situation involving porn stars and payoffs prior to the election. Congressman, you are a good, loyal Republican, but what's your take about what's been going on the last few days with Rudy Giuliani and the president?
Well, this sex thing is what got Bill Clinton into impeachment, and so that sells it on the news then. So that's what makes it a news story. And Stormy Daniels' attorney is, loves the television, and the TV cameras love to be on him. So they're making a story out of a bigger story than it should be.
Well, it's kind of helped by the cast of characters, don't you think? Let's take a look at what the president said today about the misstatements, if you will, from Rudy Giuliani.
So Rudy knows it's a witch hunt. He started yesterday. He'll get his facts straight. He's a great guy. But what he does is he feels it's a very bad thing for our country, and he happens to do it.
We've evolved in the come a long way, Cheryl, when in terms of the personal and private lives of our leaders and presidents, but there are possible election law violations there. The president's lawyer, Michael Cohen, seems to be in a big heap of trouble with the law. What's your take?
Well, unfortunately, this incident with Stormy Daniels is just the latest. If this were the first incident where we had had controversy with this president, we all might take pause and say this is a personal versus a private, or a private versus a professional or public situation. But this is just another symptom of Donald Trump's inability to be honest with the American people, with Donald Trump's inability to take the office of the presidency seriously, give it the respect and the stature that it deserves, and to not take care of the very specific and important factors that you mentioned that are right up there at the top of everybody's radar. And we want to see those things progress. And yet we get bogged down in a Stormy Daniels or a Michael Flynn or a Michael Cohen or any of the above or any of the previous.
Charlie, you represent the fastest growing political identity in America, the non-affiliated voter, the voter who really doesn't want to identify as a Republican or a Democrat. You don't speak for all MPAs, but your typical man or woman on the street, do they take this seriously, or they just kind of laugh it off?
I think there's a certain reality TV apprentice feel to this White House. And at this point, when you see the president speak, except for the 35% of the population that is bought in to the Trump presidency, no matter what he does, I think for most objective observers, when you see his face or when you hear him on the news, you pretty much assume that what you're hearing is false.
And that's the question I want to ask you, Congressman, because you said that because this is involving a porn star, this is what sells on TV. But is this something that really that all Americans should take seriously? Because it's a question about whether or not, as we saw in the ABC story, that the president is saying one thing today and saying 180 degrees something, a couple of weeks ago.
I don't think there's a criminal problem here, and so this is something that took place years ago. He's misleading. Bill Clinton misled about his, thing with Monica Lewinsky, And I think there's more important issues to be talking about than that. I just think the media is selling it, and the attorney for Stormy Daniels is milking it for everything he can. And I think we need to move on beyond this story. Trying to find the criminal involvement of an election fraud problem is very minor, and I don't think that's a big enough criminal issue.
You did mention that, though, Alan, that there is the question of whether that money was to influence a political outcome. I think most of us can accept that there is a need or a feeling to protect your family. I will join the young woman from Parkland and call BS on that, because I think the wife of the president probably knows the situation that she's in. But this is a political question because of the $130,000, and as Mayor Giuliani said, or the Attorney Giuliani said, to prevent what might happen 10 days before an election.
All right, we are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on the week in Washington right after we check the first alert weather, so stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the week in Washington, and joining us for more are former U.S. Congressman Dan Miller, Cheryl Wilson, the chair of the Manatee Democratic Party, and Charlie Kennedy of the Manatee School Board, who is one of those non-affiliated voters. Let's start with, geez, this has been such a newsworthy week. Earlier in the week, someone they believe within the Trump orbit released a list of questions, about 48 questions, that they believe that Special Counsel Mueller was going to prepare to ask the president if the president sat down for an interview. And Congressman, if you look at those questions, it becomes really clear that the Mueller investigation is still looking at whether or not there was collusion between the president's campaign and Russia. What was your take when you saw those questions come out?
It's no surprise. I mean, I think it was probably leaked really from the Trump organization rather than the Mueller. The one problem we have with that is Mueller's organization is quiet. They don't respond. And there's no one out there advocating the Mueller position. You're hearing the Trump people being anti, or the Democrats trying to defend Mueller. But Mueller and his people are just quiet, and so it's really a one-sided news story we're getting on this.
Is that good or bad?
It's good that Mueller's doing the right thing. I mean, but it makes it difficult in our process we have. The judicial process and the democratic process we have in this country is not ideal, but I mean that's the way it should be handled.
Cheryl, we were at Tiger Bay this week, and one well-known local former official who is a supporter of the president said, "Look, the fact is the economy is doing good. The unemployment rate is now below 4%. It hasn't been that way since 2000. And yeah, the president does not behave well. We know all that stuff. We don't really care much about Russia. And you guys are not giving the president the credit that he deserves."
I don't believe the president deserves a great deal of credit, but who's surprised there? I will be very happy to see the economy prosper. I'm glad to see the stock market doing well. It's good to hear the unemployment news. I can't go back to Manatee County without saying, tonight here we sit, Manatee matters. And I think we need to see what that unemployment rate in Manatee County, how it translates, what it means, what those types of jobs are, what's happening as a result of some of the decisions and actions of the administration. And yet you could go all across the country. You could certainly go to Iowa and look to see what's going to happen to the soybean crop. You could go to the Northeast and see what's going to happen with a lot of the education and environmental issues. So we're all looking at our pocketbooks, but there's a big picture that the pocketbook is a piece of. And I'm not convinced yet that the policies that are producing some early nice-looking numbers for the president to glow about is really a step in the right direction or progress.
Still, the president continues to have strong support among his base. They're not going anywhere, and including today, the president went to where his support is the strongest, which happens to be the NRA annual convention in Dallas. Let's take a look.
It seems that if we're going to outlaw guns, like so many people want to do, Democrats, we are going to have to outlaw immediately all vans and all trucks, which are now the new form of death for the maniac terrorists.
That last comment was pretty ridiculous, and I think that goes without saying. But Charlie, there are a lot of people here on the Suncoast, in Manatee County, that are strong Second Amendment supporters, and the president is talking to them.
He is, and it's unfortunate that the president chose to skip any funerals for any Parkland Douglas High School students, and he was in West Palm Beach while these funerals were taking place. So I think it's a slap in the face to Floridians for him to make the choices that he does. But most of what he does are, kind of shameless appearances like this, where he is only talking to his base. He's trying to run a presidency where he only speaks to his 35%. And as a Floridian, as an educator, I'm incredibly disappointed that he chose to address the NRA when he refused to even show up to grieve with the families and kids.
And it's only that 35% who believe this is a Second Amendment issue. You know, the situation that Charlie's addressing is not a Second Amendment issue. It's a student safety and a citizen safety issue. It's no one's attacking the Second Amendment.
New polls out this week that the Democrats are maintaining an 8-point lead in the generic poll, and that has Speaker Ryan in Washington warning that if the Democrats take over Congress, there will be gridlock, and subpoenas if the Democrats win. Congressman, I mean, is that a winning message?
Well, it's going to happen, and so the one thing the Republicans need to do is energize their base and get their base enthusiastic. It's like the NRA. The reason Trump was there is to get the people that are the Second Amendment people willing to go out and vote. The 35% that's strong supportive of Trump's are not necessarily going to vote for these congressional races. They need to turn out. So that's what it's all about, is energizing that crowd. I was there in '94, and that election was decided, basically, Republicans taking control of Congress because of one issue, guns. It was the assault weapons vote in 1993 that caused Republicans to win the '94 election.
But you also see stories and you also see polling that public opinion on the gun issue, especially after Parkland, has now started to change. So is that issue as potent as it was in '94 when you were running?
It's single issue voters we're talking about. And some people, they vote for one issue only. Abortion is sometimes an issue, the single issue election. And that's what happens, is some people feel so strong about that gun issue. I've had people stand up at town hall meetings and tell me it's a constitutional right to keep a Stinger missile at home. Now, you can't even talk about guns when someone believes they should have a Stinger missile. And so that crowd is being energized to turn out to vote because they're afraid of their guns. After Parkland, gun sales went up.
So that brings us to the midterms, and we have a congressional election, and you have, for the first time in years, the 16th congressional district, which is Sarasota, Manatee, and Southern Hillsborough County, not ranked as solid Republican anymore. It's now ranked universally almost as likely Republican. Dan, that's a big difference here, and do you believe that Vern Buchanan, in this environment, has something really to worry about?
Yes, he has something to worry about because it's a wave election. This is a Republican area, so it voted for Trump fairly strongly in Manatee County and Southern Hillsborough. The northern part of Sarasota is a little more moderate area, but it's a wave election. When these wave elections happen, the Democrats turn out with energy, and Republicans don't turn out, and that's the key, and that's what Trump.
The 11% gap, the Trump advantage in 2016 was 11% in the congressional district. And I've been watching all across the country in these special elections, and some of the gaps were much larger than the 11%. I've lived here a long time. The fact that it's a Republican area doesn't shock me the way it shocks some Democrats who are moving here. But I'm feeling the energy for the first time. I'm feeling like that 11% gap is certainly something that's very manageable.
But still, Republicans have an incredible advantage in terms of voter registration, both in Manatee and in Sarasota County. The real, deciders in this race are non-affiliated voters like you, Charlie. And, do you feel that independent voters are any less likely to vote Republican this time around than they did before?
I think there's a couple factors at work. The Republican base will come out And I think one thing that has changed, Congressman Miller brought up, is that I think for so many years people have been hearing that they're going to take our guns. And I think that is starting to wear off, number one. Number two, if Democrats, I believe this could be a wave election, but we have heard before of Democratic get out the vote efforts, which especially among young people, and I'm a former high school teacher, so I'm well aware of this, but they just don't materialize. But for independent voters, which was your question, I think that will be the wave, because I don't think with a Trump presidency, almost 2 years into a Trump presidency, I don't think Trump is pulling too many independents anymore. And they may not want to vote Democratic, but they know they don't want to vote for Trump, or those who are still attaching themselves to Trump despite all of the negative, all the negative press and the negative associations that come with being associated with Trump.
Or incorrectly disassociating themselves with
All right,
Trump.
we have to take a quick break. We'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. Stay with us. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. So, Congressman, as we head deeper or closer to the midterms, with everything that's swirling around with the Russia investigation, the Stormy Daniels, the economy is booming. North Korea, I mean, that would be a real feather in the president's cap, let alone peace for the world, if that happened. Are you optimistic or pessimistic in terms of your party's chances in the midterms?
I'm pessimistic. It's a wave election. The wave elections are kind of unpredictable, and we've had them in '94 and 2006 when the Democrats had the wave election. People came out in 2006 because they were mad at Bush. They were mad about the hurricane issue. They were mad about being in Iraq, and they came out to vote against Bush, and even though Bush wasn't on the ballot. And so that's how the Democrats took control of Congress.
But Cheryl, is it enough for the Democrats just to sit back and see the president kind of implode in terms of some of these criminal investigations, no matter what's happening? That might be good news. A Democratic pollster came out this week saying that Democratic momentum has stalled because the Democrats are not coming forward with any kind of economic message to win back white middle-class voters.
We have heard that since the election in 2016. I have begun to turn that around with people who come into our forums or just come in to talk politics in our office and ask them, particularly if they are Democrats, are you a Democrat? What do you stand for? It has not been a secret what Democrats support and base their candidacies on. And I believe we have a message. I believe we could go down the list from health care to the environment to child care to health, women's health to women's rights. And all of those eventually impact the economic message. So yeah, I'm proud to run on what the to stand for what the Democrats run on.
Charlie, what do independent voters want to hear?
I think, to be honest with you, they want to hear what Democrats stand for, and I think Trump has set Democrats up on a silver platter. And messages such as the tax reform package, which is really the only thing that Trump can point to, and Democrats could simply say something like, to capture those middle-class, working-class voters, to say, if you elect Democrats, we will make the corporate tax cuts temporary, and we'll make the personal income tax permanent, because right now the opposite is true.
Congressman, we only have a couple of seconds left, but you hear stories that Republicans are not running on that tax cut.
Well, it's got a mixed message. I mean, but the economy is doing well, and so that's what they can run on, is the economy is doing well. Deregulation has been effective in this economy. People don't talk about deregulation, but that's had a big impact on the economy. So there's a lot of things they can run on, but the problem is who's energized to turn out to vote in November,
And that's the Democrats.
that's right.
It is.
All right. Thank you all. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about last night's show on the census. The Trump administration wants to add the question, are you a U.S. citizen? There are illegals who might not like to answer that question out of fear of being deported. The problem, not answering the question, is that states are allotted members of Congress based on actual population, which means a lot of federal funding is at stake. We went to Facebook for your thoughts, and Kevin says the U.S. Constitution doesn't ask to count the numbers of citizens there are. It asks how many people live in the country. But Carol says, are you a U.S. citizen? Should be a mandatory question on all census surveys. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Former Congressman Dan Mueller, Cheryl Wilson, the chair of the Manatee Democratic Party, and Charlie Kennedy of the Manatee County School Board.